All right, it is 12:01, so we can get started. This meeting is a virtual meeting during the COVID emergency, and City Hall is open, but appointments must be made to come in and get your business done. Check the city website for the current details of COVID-19 service impacts, and all meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact csc@london.ca. And now I will look to committee to see if there are any disclosures of conflict. Seeing none, I'll move to the consent items. We have 6 items here, and wondering if anybody would like to pull anything from the consent items. Deputy Mayor Morgan, go ahead.
Yes, and my apologies for the noise. My kids have decided to print something at the start of my meeting, so sorry about that. I'd like to pull 2.3, the review of ward boundaries.
All right, anything else? Seeing none, I'll look for a motion for the remainder of the consent items. That's 2.1, 2.1 through to 2.6, except for 2.3. Moved by Councillor Van Hulst and seconded by Councillor Pelosa. Any comments on those items? Councillor Van Hulst, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a number of comments, but none worth pulling the item. Looking at the 2022 municipal election update. So there's a lot of interesting things to think about there. I'm glad we're not looking at internet voting. I think it's a wise decision to avoid that, simply because of cybersecurity concerns. I don't think, I question our ability to keep an election secure. So I think that was a good decision. Looking at the standing committees meetings and annual meeting calendar, I want to thank the clerks for their work here. I was quite pleased. There's a few things I spotted and really liked. One was the meeting on December 21st for council. I do like it when we can finish up by approving the things that we've passed in one year in that same year, rather than waiting a number of weeks and sometimes almost a month to get to a council meeting the next year. So that was good. I see what we did to deal with the holidays in the summer was bump up the SPPC meetings onto the Wednesday, with the cycle of the regular meetings. I think that's a great choice. I did have one question maybe I can ask. I noticed that there seemed to be an early inauguration meeting. So the last couple of council terms, council was inaugurated at the beginning of December, and this time it seems to be mid-November. And I just wanted to ask the clerks to maybe comment on how that came to be the case.
Councillor, I'll just point out that because of changes to the from the province, the term of council in 2022 begins in mid-November to shorten the lame duck period between the election date and what used to be the start of council.
Okay, well, thank you. That's the answer I was looking at. Of course, I was also wondering about the lame duck period, so that does make it shorter. Thank you. I guess I missed that point. And looking through that agency, board, and commission asset management maturity assessment, I think that's it's going to be a fair bit of work. I see it looks like we're going to have to require 3 more full-time employees to do all of that. But having a good asset management plan is wise for the city, and of course I think it'll be good for our boards and commissions to get them moving on that as well. I feel bad for some of the smaller municipalities because that might be a challenge for them, whereas I think London can handle this project quite well. I think in terms of us doing the asset management, I think we're almost into the excellence category. So if not, it's certainly competence. So it's an interesting scale, but I think that will be valuable for us as well. So those are my comments. I may have a couple more on 2.3, but thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pelosi, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just going to speak to item 2.2, being the 2022 municipal election update. As upset as I still am that we've lost ranked ballot, I am glad that contained within Bill 204 was that Elections Ontario will be providing the voters list to municipalities. Unfortunately, it won't be to the 2026 election, but I do believe this is a wonderful step, as many times when you're door canvassing, people say, I'm already in the voters list, don't worry, I'm good. I didn't get my card, but I'm good. And it's like, no, there's just different systems and it's hard. And I think this will clear up a lot of voter confusion and help, hopefully, with voter turnout. My question to staff, as here we're talking about voting locations and parking as a concern noted within it. What provisions do we make sure that there's secure, or even ideally secure, but any kind of bicycle parking at the voting locations that we pick?
Okay, I will go to Clerk Saunders.
I apologize, Madam Chair. Could you please repeat the question?
Certainly. When we look at voting locations and parking has been noted within this report, do we also, what considerations do we give to bicycle parking?
Through you, Madam Chair, to be honest, we hadn't considered that, but we will certainly add that to a list of what we're looking at when we're looking at locations.
Perfect. Thank you for that. A question, realizing that next steps after this report is to look at the sign bylaw, wondering when we could expect the report back regarding the sign bylaw. Through you, Madam Chair.
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would ask Ms. Corman to respond to that, as she's working on the report with Ms. Raycroft.
Great. Ms. Corman?
Hi, yes, through you to the chair. We are working to have that before the fall of this year.
Thank you for that. And finally, recognizing that mail-in ballots are a popular option, growing in popularity at an increased cost of about $2 per electorate, and recognizing within this report that we're speaking to the pandemic and multiple waves and not sure how everyone might feel coming back out and voting in person traditionally, just making sure that we have or will have the capacity, both financially and staff-wise, to address what could likely be an increase in demand for mail-in ballots.
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, we've taken all of that into consideration within our budget and within our processes. Because we're familiar with the vote by mail process, as we've been using it since 2010, and also I used it in my previous position as clerk in another municipality. So we're prepared for an uptake to it, and it's within our budget.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor Morgan?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My comment, and it's just a comment, is on the annual meeting calendar. A few years back, I had expressed concerns about the situation that we arose in from time to time of having a standing committee meeting report into council the very next day, which gives a very short turnaround for the public to engage on the decisions of committee before council. And I think that this annual meeting calendar, as well as the one that we've been working with this year, continues to address that concern. And so I want to commend the clerks for the work on the annual meeting calendar. I think we're landing on something that is really functional and seems to be working very well. So I just wanted to provide that feedback.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other questions or comments on the consent items from committee members or visiting counselors? I have a quick question about mail-in ballots for the clerk. So I note that we've been doing it since 2010 and that we require people to ask for them. So I know in other jurisdictions, specifically in different areas of the US, when they just went through their presidential election, different areas handled it differently. And in some, an application or a request form was proactively mailed out. I wonder if we have any thoughts of taking that kind of proactive approach, and if we might pivot if we see, God forbid, a resurgence of COVID just prior to the election period next year.
Through you, Madam Chair, we do a fairly extensive communication process through our elections. We had not contemplated sending something out to each household. We can certainly consider that, but we do proactively do a communications campaign about vote by mail and encourage people to take up that choice. And we also use vote by mail for those individuals that may not be able or are comfortable leaving their home as a in-home ballot kit that we would take to them as well. So, but we can certainly take a look at when we're doing our communications plan, how we could report that out. And yes, we would be ready to pivot if we had to. There is a section in the Elections Act that allows, should another emergency pandemic come, that allows us to make some changes in order to address that emergency.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Right now, the way we do vote by mail, are there restrictions that only certain people can use that option, or is it open to anyone?
Through you, Madam Chair, it's open to everyone. It's open to anyone that's on the voters list that's eligible to vote. They just would need to pre-register.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. I think it's something that we might want to, not even just in the context of a pandemic, it's something even us as counselors might want to promote, given the high voter turnout in the US, whether or not any of that can be attributed to the high percentage of people that ended up voting by mail. But we saw in the last election a decrease. There had been an increase in the 2014 election, and then a sharp decrease again in voter turnout in 2018. So I think it might be an option for us to promote, to encourage people to vote, and as a convenient way for people can have their choice registered in the ballot box. And I will ask one more time if there are any other comments or questions from committee for these consent items. I'm seeing none. It's been moved and seconded, so I will call the vote.
I vote yes, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 5-0.
Access to item 2.3, the review of ward boundaries update, and Deputy Mayor Morgan, you pulled this item, so go ahead.
Yes, I have a couple of questions for the clerks related to this item. First off, I appreciate the report and all of the background that you've given, and I understand the challenge related to a full and comprehensive ward boundary review based on timing, and I understand the process that you've outlined on what a comprehensive ward boundary review would look like. And should council wish to proceed with that, I think, yes, I agree, it's advantageous to do that early in a term so that all of those components could be done. But I also recognize that the clerks have outlined a number of smaller options attached to the end of this report, much like the options that we considered on the last term of council leading into the last election to make some minor corrections between the wards to, I guess, hold off the need for a comprehensive review for at least a period of time, or provide a balancing going into the subsequent term of council. So my question is, if colleagues were interested in proceeding with any one of the options that were listed, is there time to complete that with the proper public consultation for consideration for the next municipal election?
I'll go to you, Madam Clerk.
Through you, Madam Chair, there is time. We would have to, because of the public process, we would have to hold a public participation meeting in June. We're anticipating, or I should say we're prepared to have an advertisement and notice out for the June 21st Corporate Services Committee meeting, should council decide to move forward with one or a number of the options that are contained in the report.
Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So, and to my colleagues, and I know there's a number of guests, I anticipate a number of colleagues will want to speak to this matter. And I'm very interested in hearing what colleagues think about possible minor rebalancing of between the wards leading up to the next election. I would say that the option that seems viable to me up in my part of the city, and I'd probably restrict my comments to those for now, is the option 4, which is a combination of shifting population from 7 to 5 and then 5 to 3. Some of the other options up this way don't seem to make the matter more balanced, but create other imbalances. And I'm also conscious of the population growth rates of the different wards. And I think, undersizing the right ones at the right time makes sense. And I appreciate that the growth rates were included. It seems to me if we leave the status quo, a ward like Ward 7, which also has one of the higher growth rates, is going to quickly exceed even the threshold that the clerks have identified as reasonable to rebalance the wards at 25%. We made the minor correction of dropping a few thousand or transferring a few thousand residents to other wards last time, and we've gotten exactly back to where we started to. Given the current growth rates, I would anticipate that would be the situation we're in again, and the next Ward 7 councillor would be hopefully myself, but obviously that's yet to be seen. Would be representing a ward that is probably outside of that 25% range. So that is an option that I'm interested in pursuing. Obviously that impacts wards 5 and 3. And so I'm very interested in hearing from Councillor Cassidy. I don't think Councillor Salee is on the call, but I'm interested in hearing from them as well on how those changes may impact those populations. So that's the option I'm interested in. I wanted to throw that out there. I'm not making a motion yet on this because I know there are lots of other options and there's probably a number of comments that my colleagues have on this. So I'll cede the speaking and listen to my colleagues.
All right, I see Councillor Van Holst has his hand up, so I'll go to you next, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I also appreciate that there was quite a bit of work on here and some interesting alternatives. I've also seen that on the added agenda, there has been submissions requesting some of those. One in particular is trying to make sure that the BIAs are in the same ward. I think there's some value in there. And I wonder if any thought was given to moving a portion of Ward 13 into Ward 1 as a means of having the BIA in the same ward. Was any thought given there? I guess that would be a portion of the Soho area just between Adelaide and the tracks.
Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to turn this over to either Ms. Corman or Ms. Raycroft. They wrote the report and they have the detailed knowledge of what was looked at.
All right, go ahead. Either Ms. Corman or Ms. Raycroft.
Yes, Ms. Corman here. We follow council direction for a 14 system that would result in a more balanced population And both 13 and 1 at that time fell well within the range. So we did not contemplate altering those boundaries.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. And I'll also look forward to seeing or hearing what my colleagues has to say about some of these potential changes that might be worth considering. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll go to you, Councillor Lewis, and then I'll go to Councillor Hillier next.
Thank you for recognizing me, Madam Chair. I wanted to specifically speak to option 7, which is the Ward 4 Hale Street area to Ward 2 option in the report. Colleagues will note that there's been communication sent from the BIA on this. I understand that communications were also circulated from the Community Association. This one's a rather small adjustment. This would certainly, in my mind, be a minor boundary adjustment. It's moving 651 people currently into Ward 2 from Ward 4. That still leaves Ward 4 1.45% over, and Ward 2 still 10.6% under. So it's fairly minor. It gets Ward 2 a little bit closer to the average ward size, but not quite there. But what it really does, and why I'm really interested in pursuing this, is it does unite some communities of interest. And the BIA was referenced specifically already by Councillor Van Holst, but it also unites the Hale Street District neighborhood into one ward, and really reduces the spread of the Argyle Community Association rather than being across 3 wards down to 2 wards. So I'm hoping colleagues will give this some serious consideration. I don't know what Councillor Helmer's thoughts are on this, but obviously it impacts his ward as well. But to me, it's also consistent with the sort of boundaries that we use. Highbury Ave being a primary artery into the city, it uses an infrastructure boundary as a ward boundary, which makes a lot of sense. So I am really interested in seeing this adjustment move forward. I think there's general community support from some organizations. Obviously, I would want to see what the broader public had to say through a public participation meeting. But my sense is that this would make sense for the Argyle area. So I hope colleagues will consider this option moving forward for some public consultation and seeing where that leads us.
I'll go to you next, Councillor Hillier.
Yes, thank you very much for recognizing me. I'm here today to show my support for option 8 for a very simple reason. It encompasses a lot of the issues that both I and Councillor Pelosa have issues with the odor problem in that end. And the residents on both sides of the road have the same issue, and it would be nice to address them all as a whole. And it only affects 350, and I think would make it easier for the word from me as a councillor to be more effective in the Glenworth area. I also, looking at option 9, I don't really support this one right now because I'm not sure if it takes into effect the growth in Summerside, Victoria in the Woods, and then we've just broken grounds on the other sides of Jackson Road. So that's another 1,000 units. So I am for option 8, but I'm not for option 9. Thank you.
So I'm going to, I don't see hands in the air. Oh, Councillor Pelosa, go ahead. And then I have a question for the clerk.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just trying to slide into the right wards to have some flow to our conversation today. Following Councillor Hillier, option 9, yes, I know he's excited for growth in his ward. We also have Exeter Road having huge expansions and potential developments around White Oaks Mall as well that would add growth throughout it. In regards to option 8, looking through you to staff, I see that staff's proposal follows the 401. Wondering if consideration, like I know it's a nice line that is very visually appealing, but wondering if there was consideration to give it going across on either the 402, right? If we went with option 8, there wouldn't be a little triangle left on its own, or following Digman Drive, which also follows closely to the urban growth boundary.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't know if that's the clerk or if it's Ms. Corman again, but I'll leave it open.
Madam Chair, I'll turn that over to Ms. Corman.
No, that option was not contemplated, just to follow the 401.
Okay, thank you. Just looking at, I know staff's recommendation was to take no action, but as we're having the conversation, I would be concerned about the section on Westminster Drive kind of being alone out there, or the option for Digman, which I have not discussed with Councillor Hillier. But as we're here today, those are my comments in regards to the proposals. And that's everything I have currently, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So to the clerk, the recommendation coming from the city clerk is that we not proceed. And I understand that the deputy mayor asked a question is, do we have time to make the changes? The recommendation was to not proceed. So I'm wondering why that is the recommendation, and what would be a better time if now is not recommended.
To you, Madam Chair, we are not recommending any changes at this time because they would be minor adjustments, and we believe that the population balance at this time is appropriate. I would certainly be recommending to council, the next council, that they undertake a more comprehensive review, including retaining a consultant to assist with that review early in the next term, so that it can be in place and we have plenty of time to deal with it prior to the 2026 election.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just quickly from the chair, I think that there's a lot of minor fiddling going on, and when we hear the different councillors saying, well, I support this option but not that option, and this option but not that option, it seems a little bit scatter approach, and I do support the comments in the report and the comments that the city clerk just made about taking a very comprehensive review during the next term of council. I wonder to Ms. Corman, when the different options were prepared, did it take into account the growth projections that you have on page 23 of the agenda, 3.3 in the report? And it shows the projections for growth in all of the different wards. So is that included in your options, or would these growth patterns, if they come to be, just skew everything all over again?
Yes, we try to as much as possible, but the city clerk staff currently we don't have the expertise to delve into those growth projections as they pertain to these small adjustments at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Corman. Do I
Madam,
sorry, Madam
Chair.
Clerk. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
If I could just add, we do take in considerations plans of subdivisions, et cetera, that have already been approved. But I concur with Ms. Corman that a more comprehensive review with a consultant would be the best action to take for the 2026 election.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any other comments or questions? Go ahead, Councillor Helmer.
Thank you. I wanted to hear from everybody to see what they were thinking. My own view on this is that unless there's really compelling reasons to make changes to the ward boundaries, you just leave it alone, and that stability in the ward boundaries has got its own value. So, you know, we've made some minor adjustments in the past, relatively close to the deadline. I would say we cut it pretty close last time. I think it was around February. And this time around, we're even closer. And one of the reasons I think just leaving things the way they are for now is a good idea is we have the census underway right now, and the results of that census are going to come out, you know, shortly after the next election, right? But basically all the data releases will be out within 18 months of this month. You know, the sort of May 10th was the sort of census day. So, you know, I think we'll have a lot of good information about what's going on at the beginning of the next term of council, coincide with the comprehensive review. We've actually been exceeding the population growth projections so far, and I think we're going to have some more significant adjustments. The part that's being discussed between Ward 4 and Ward 2 not surprising to me that it's being discussed. Being on the other side of Highbury, people are often, because they're in a different provincial and federal electoral district than the rest of the people in Ward 4, they're often a bit confused about which ward that they're in, and that does come up from time to time. I would say the people in that area have a lot of things in common with the people on the other side of Hale Street, for sure. This is actually sort of the easternmost edge of East London, right, in terms of the planning district. But really, people, I think, in that area associate more with Argyle than they do with East London. And I would say that the issues that people have on the west side of Highbury and the east side of Highbury are quite similar. So either side of Wilton, Ave, Dolton, these are issues that most of the people have that are in common. And it's not that different from what people have on the other side of Hale Street either. Like the neighborhood has a lot of things in common, sort of across Highbury and across Hale. And I do think over time that this kind of adjustment could make sense to bring it into Ward 2. I just would not make any changes right now, and I wouldn't make changes in the north. I wouldn't make changes in the east. I mean, we are still in the middle of an emergency, and I honestly think we have to eventually say, hey, we're just going to leave some things alone that aren't really problems. If we don't think that the 25% threshold is the appropriate threshold, and we actually think it should be lower than that, then I think we should look at changing the policy to actually articulate that. Because the clerks are recommending no changes because it's within that range of fairness. That's a very well established range, and I'm comfortable with them the way they are right now. I think we don't have to make changes every term of council to the ward boundaries. We made some incremental ones last time. I said at that time that we're going to be into some larger ones in not too distant future if we get into significant population growth changes like we've been seeing. And I think that's coming true. I think we can all kind of see that coming. I know Councillor Morgan was certainly in line with that the last time we talked about it, that bigger changes were probably necessary. So I would just leave it right now. It's not something that comes up very often. People don't say, hey, I really would like to change wards, or this doesn't make sense to me, I got to move. And I would just leave it for now and deal with it at the beginning, sort of in the first year of the next term of council, get the comprehensive process underway. The census releases will come out sort of partway through that process. You can have a good discussion about it in the middle of the term and then make the adjustments for the next term. One thing I'm concerned about, and just in terms of timing, is these kind of changes are very small. I doubt there would be an LPAT appeal, but if there was an LPAT appeal, you might not even be able to get a hearing in time to get the board boundaries in place by the end of the year, which is the deadline.
Thank you, Councillor. Go to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much, and apologies for coming in a little bit later in this discussion.
Mr. Mayor, can you either put your mouth closer to your microphone or just speak louder? We can't hear you. Sorry.
Is that any better?
It's a little bit better.
I'm sorry, because I don't know to make that louder. Is that a little bit better? All right, so I'm going to get up close and personal here. Thanks. And I apologize, colleagues. I've just come into this. I've got the big city mayors meetings today, and I've been part of that thus far. So again, I appreciate your understanding. I'm comfortable with supporting the clerk's recommendation at this time, and here's why. I think concerns expressed around boundaries and population size of wards and all is extremely legitimate. And I think those kinds of things do matter. But it feels a great idea, just not the right time. And to me, it's an issue of our priorities. You've heard some other comments earlier about issues around COVID. The national census that impacts our city. Those things have direct impact on all of us. And I think the ultimate thing is timing. And when I'm talking about timing now, I'm talking about, we've got a number of elections coming up over the next 18 months, all three, no less our own. But I think COVID has really put great demands on our staff. It's more important to do it right than quick. And that would be my view on this. So hope the colleagues would imagine that. along with the understanding why we want to do this at some stage. And I think that for the next election cycle, that seems absolutely logical, and we'd certainly embrace the support of the clerk to do it at that time. But with the timing as it is right now, it just feels like it'll be rushed, and that just doesn't make a lot of sense to me at this time. Those would be my comments. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. I just want to say I appreciate colleagues' comments, and actually Councillor Helmer raised another really valid point with the Ward 4, Ward 2 boundary, is that it also runs across a federal electoral district. Although I know that that happens in many places, this is one of those areas where that could clean up. You know, I'm getting the sense that folks definitely want to see a larger comprehensive review, and I do too. There's no doubt about that. But these are minor in nature adjustments, you know, and I would come back to Deputy Mayor Morgan's point. Long before 2026, Ward 7 is going to exceed the 25% threshold. So doing nothing today is going to mean that the next Ward 7 councillor, and, you know, personally, I hope it's the Deputy Mayor as well, but that the next Ward 7 councillor is going to be disproportionately representing a significant chunk of Londoners who really, when you think about the representation by population fairness issue, their votes are going to mean less representation than the votes that are cast by voters in my ward or in Councillor Van Holt's ward by the virtue of our smaller populations. So I'm sorry to say, colleagues, and I say this respectfully, I don't accept that, you know, the pandemic means it's not the right time. The business of government does have to go on. It has been going on in many aspects of what we're doing at City Hall. I think democratic fairness is absolutely the business of government and shouldn't be put off because it's we don't like the timing of it. So I don't know where things are going to go today. I get the sense that maybe it might just be a receive the report and support the clerk's recommendation. If that's the case, I'll certainly bring this up again at council because I think at least the option in Ward 4 to option 7 there on page 31 is quite minor. And most importantly, it's uniting identified communities of interest, not just the BIA, but the neighborhoods themselves. So I really hope folks take a step back and look at some of the things we've done during the pandemic as a council. That certainly, in my view, could have waited, but we went ahead with them anyway. And when we come to an issue of democratic fairness, I would argue personally that that is not one that should be postponed because of a pandemic. It's the very reason we're here is to serve the democratic process. And I think we should really look at least sending some of these options to the public for some consultation. Now, remembering that if we do that, we're not making a decision until after a public participation meeting is held and the public's had a chance to weigh in. We may hear from the public that they hate all of these options and don't want to see them proceed. But I think that we certainly owe it to the public to hear from them first.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. I'll go to you, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'm going to express my own personal view on this matter, and I recognize that there will be a diversity of viewpoints on this. But you know, I got elected pushing for ranked ballots. I pushed and brought in neighborhood decision making. Like, these democratic processes are very important to me, and I have very specific personal views on it. And I'm not saying that those views are right or better than someone else's, but I want colleagues to understand why I continue to pursue this. Is I actually think it's a really important thing that you know, 35,000 people have to funnel their expressions through me to the council through one vote. And in other words, that is more like 24,000. Like that is an important democratic issue to me personally. And I understand there will always be a variance between the sizes of the wards. But in the case of the ward that I represent, I can see this before 2026 getting very out of alignment with some other wards in the city. And I understand the concerns about the pandemic, and I understand the concerns about the timing, but I also appreciate that for those future residents of Ward 7, that their vote should not be watered down as much as it potentially could be. And, you know, I do not think that we're probably going to pass something to change things this time around. I think there's a compelling argument to be made to do it in a comprehensive way next term, but that does not mean I'm not going to try to do this for the residents of Ward 7 and the future ones. And so I will move like option 7 at this time. It impacts my ward. It sounds like Councillor Lewis is going to move option 4, and it sounds like Councillor Hillier is interested in option 8. And so I will make a motion to put all those on the floor. They can all be voted on separately, whether they pass or fail. I just feel compelled to, for my ward, to try. And I will respect that if we're going to do this next term, that's fine. But I feel compelled to at least put it on the floor, because all that is going to do is drive it to a public consultation process, at which time the public can weigh in on this. And if they say, don't do it, like this is a bad idea, I'm going to listen to them. But I think that there's a compelling democratic argument to be made in my part of the city, and I'm willing to pursue that, or at least give it a try. And I see these as, to be honest, I see this as a minor adjustment that is still going to require a comprehensive review. This is just going to take care of things through 2026, because the changes we make now are going to be the entire term of next council. Whether we start a review early in that term, it's not going to come into effect until the end of that next term. So I'm willing to put that on the floor. I respect people who may need to vote against it, but it's just something that I feel compelled to do. So that's what I'd like to do. I don't know if I have a seconder at all, but I'm willing to give it a try, Madam Chair.
Okay, I'm seeing Councillor Van Holst is seconding that. And did you want to speak as well, Councillor Van Holst?
I'm happy to do so, Madam Chair. So I think there's some value in tweaking the ward boundaries. There's some things that make sense, and if we can do things that make sense, that's great. On the other hand, I realize in terms of, is this a must-have, a should-have, or a nice-to-have? In some cases, it may just be a nice-to-have. I might ask through you to our clerks, what's going to be involved in making these changes? So let's say these are passed, then what work would need to be done, and how would that impact the coming election in terms of the efforts required from our staff?
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Madam Chair, we would have to adjust the ward boundaries, obviously, and we would have to notify the residents that an elector that are affected by that change, which is a bit confusing. We did that as well in the last election, where we had some minor changes. So we'd have to hold the public participation meeting report back. If changes are approved, we would then have to, if it goes through the appeal period with no appeals, we would then have to prepare a communication and a notification to those residents that are impacted.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. Well, that's helpful. And I'm maybe asking for the clerk to use a crystal ball, but were we to wait till 2026 to make some changes? Can you give us a sense of what a comprehensive change might be like? How much more would we be doing than these changes that have been recommended?
Madam Clerk?
Through Madam Chair, unfortunately, my crystal ball doesn't work very well. It's difficult to say at this time, but at least doing a comprehensive review, we'd have clear indication of population. And as Councillor Helmer indicated, we'd also have the census information by that time. So we'd have more up-to-date and clear information on which to undertake that review than we do currently.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. And I see that having that population is very valuable in terms of balancing out the numbers. I also think that intuitive geographical boundaries are helpful as well. So I don't know how the vote will go, but I'll look to see what other councillors may have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I wonder if I could pass the chair to you. I don't see any hands up, and I would like to comment on this motion.
Thank you. So, Madam Chair, I go to you.
Thank you, Councillor. So, Councillor Lewis brought up the point that government continues during pandemic, and that is absolutely true. And a number of councillors talked about the democratic process and the importance of representation, etc. Not looking to just be a flatterer, but all of the constituents of Ward 7 have been very well represented by the deputy mayor, and I know they know that, and notwithstanding the size of the ward, and I don't think that they are losing anything. I know that's not the point, but I just thought I would make that. These adjustments, if we were stuck in time right now and nothing were to change in the near future, not 10 years down the road, if nothing is anticipated to change soon, then absolutely all of these adjustments make perfect sense. But we don't know where we really are. We don't really have a true sense of where we're going to be until we do that comprehensive review. And this is where my concern lies, is to make these changes, to undergo a comprehensive review, and then to have to backtrack some of these changes, move some of these areas back to the wards where they were originally. I don't know if that will happen, but I can't say for sure that that will absolutely not happen. And that I want to share an experience that happened in the last election. We, because of population growth, we added a number of polling stations in the city, and there were new polling stations for some Ward 5 residents. They actually, for the first time, went and voted in the geographical boundaries of Ward 7. We know how difficult that kind of broad communication is out to the city. A lot of residents, unfortunately, don't even know what ward they're in right now and don't know who their ward councillor is. So I heard from, on election day, I heard from a longtime resident who had actually was a next door neighbor to former Mayor Joni Beckler. So it was very engaged in local politics, was very aware of things that were going on. He did not know where his new polling station was. And he, for the first time, probably in his adult life, did not vote. Now that was sad for me because he was a supporter of mine, but it was more sad for him and sad for democracy. And so I use that as an example when we think that all of the communications that we do are adequate and people are aware and understand what's going on. It isn't always the case. So my fear is rushing these changes, and how many people are going to be affected that way, that they don't understand the changes. And when we talk about a public participation meeting, this is where the pandemic really is affecting this stuff. The clerks and city staff have done a phenomenal job trying to make our public participation meetings continue and to be effective and to give people an opportunity to be engaged and to participate. But it is a challenge during COVID. It is a challenge for people to get involved and to understand exactly how they can get involved, where they need to go to find this information. When we look at the growth projections, if we're only talking about the 3, 5, and 7 changes, all 3 of those awards are set to experience some pretty substantial growth. I know I have a subdivision in Ward 5 that's currently being built, so that would have been included in the figures that were included on that option plan. However, I do know that I have a number of applications getting ready to come forward for approval. And we're talking thousands of units. So, and I'm not saying that to say whoever the ward councillor is now going to be dealing with this extra skewed situation. I'm saying that that is that uncertainty. There's still so much uncertainty, and I worry that we fiddle and we have this menu of options and we pick off it like an a la carte menu, and what's going to happen after the comprehensive review. I think we really need to stop and take a pause, notwithstanding that this has been a long-term issue in Ward 7, and Deputy Mayor Morgan has been an excellent advocate for this, not just for Ward 7, but the idea of appropriate representation in each and every ward to ensure that each and every constituent's voice is adequately represented at the city council table. So those are my thoughts. I support the staff recommendation. I know this has been a long time coming, but we are in a really significant growth period. That London has really taken off over the last few years, so it has accelerated the problem. I think we need to take our time and we need to do this methodically. Thank you.
Madam Chair, I'll return the chair to you, but perhaps first go to Councillor Hillier.
Yes, thank you. When I expressed my interest in option 8 is I do appreciate it, but I do feel we need to have more conversation with the affected councillors and with staff in this. So if it would be okay with the deputy mayor to remove option 8 from his motion. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Hillier. I'll go back to you, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I have no objection to that. I only put it on because Councillor Hillier wanted it. To be honest, my main concern is option 7. So, but I'll leave option 4 since Councillor Lewis is going to raise it at council anyways. I thought put it on the floor. You can vote on them separate. I'll decide whether or not I support that.
Thank you. Any other? I'm not seeing any new hands in the air, just a couple of old ones. Oh, go ahead, Councillor Helmer.
Somebody say old hand. Yeah. So just one thing I want to flag. I can see that we're going to vote on making changes. I still don't think that that's a great idea right now, but I do want to flag that in the report it says, you know, we've accommodated some of the on-campus residents by adding numbers to the population because we can get those numbers from Fanshawe and Western. That leaves unresolved the population of off-campus students, and this is not a small. It's not a small thing. So when you're looking at all these numbers and you're saying, oh, this ward is over and this ward is lower, you know, those figures are pretty good for suburban areas where there's not a lot of student housing, but they are not good. We know that they're undercounting areas that have a lot of off-campus student housing. So in around Fanshawe, in around Western, in the near campus neighborhoods, in my ward as well, in Ward 4, there's lots of student housing and student rentals. And we know that there's lots, but we don't know precisely how many. And this is an important part of effective representation, is getting a good handle on the student population, especially off campus. And this is one of the reasons why I'm saying just like leave it until you get to a comprehensive review, because some of the issues around the suburban areas being overrepresented are actually lessened by actually counting the students that are living in the core. Because yes, you'll still have a higher population, but it's not quite as high and the variance is not quite as much as it is if you were counting the students in the first place. It doesn't solve the, say, underrepresentation issue where you've got smaller wards in, say, Councillor Hillier's area where the population is lower. But it does help probably in Ward 2. There's a fair number of off-campus student rentals in Ward 2 and in Ward 3. And I just think doing the comprehensive review and trying to get a better estimate of that will help us to get to the more balanced, effective representation that I think everyone is striving for here. So I'm open to changes I have supported changes in the past sort of this magnitude, although the change that Councillor Morgan is proposing in the north is, I mean, that's quite a lot of people being moved around. It's not a very small, I wouldn't describe it as minor. It's a lot of people, but in the context of his ward, it's less than it would be in others, I guess. So I just wanted to raise that to make sure everyone knows that we're undercounting, and we know we're undercounting, and we generally know where the off-campus student housing is.
Thank you, Councillor. Back to you, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I appreciate Councillor Helmer raising the off-campus housing. I did just want to chime in very quickly through you on that. While certainly there is a little bit of off-campus housing in Ward 2, it's pretty small in my experience over the last 2.5 years as compared to Ward 3 and Ward 4. Most of the off-student housing around Fanshawe actually continues to remain concentrated in Ward 3. There's not a whole lot of that happening in Ward 2. Now, is there an opportunity for some of that to change? I think there would be. And I know that there are a couple of small applications working their way through the planning process for a little bit of intensification that might provide a few more student housing opportunities in Ward 2. But in generally, Ward 2's pretty blue collar suburban, and the students who are living here are, and again, in very general terms, because there are, of course, variations for everybody. But a lot of the off-student housing that resides in Ward 2 is actually students who grew up in the homes that they're still living in because they're living at home with their parents and attending Fanshawe or Western. So I'm pretty confident that they are actually being counted because they've been in those homes for quite a number of years.
And I forgot to check with you, Councillor Van Hulst. Are you okay with the modification to the motion? You're the seconder? Yes, you are. Great. I will add as well, probably 5, 6, and 7 have quite a large number of off-campus students. I know I have a lot in Ward 5, and I know Councillor Squire has a lot in Ward 6 as well. So thank you, Councillor Helmer, for making that point. Are there any other comments or anyone else want to weigh in? Councillor Deputy Mayor, sorry, Deputy Mayor Morgan, go ahead.
That's okay. This is the last time I'll weigh in. I want to thank my colleagues for their comments today. And I want to thank you for appreciating that you understand my reasons why I would want to pursue this. And I'm trying to be very consistent here. And I will say, if this does not go my way, that is okay. I will look forward to the comprehensive review that everybody seems very supportive of next term of council, should I have the privilege of being here to push for that. But this is something I can push for now. Everything else is not a guarantee. And so I'm pleased to put the motion on the floor. I'll respect everybody's thoughts and opinions, and I really appreciate the dialogue today. I think there's been excellent points made all around.
Okay, so the motion is A on the staff report, which is to receive this report. And then I guess B would be that civic administration be directed to proceed. Oh, you. All right, the wording of the motion is in eScribe, so if you're not there yet, you can go there. So B, the civic administration be directed to, sorry. So that the city clerk be directed to proceed to arrange a public participation meeting, including any necessary information at a future meeting of the Corporate Services Committee with respect to the following proposed ward boundary adjustment as outlined in the staff report dated May 31st, 2021, with respect to this matter. A, option 4, Ward 7 Masonville area to Ward 5, Ward 5 Fanshawe Park Road area to Ward 3, and B, option 7, Ward 4 Hale Street area to Ward 2. So those are on the floor, and I'll go to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Just a question. Are we voting on these as
Can you get closer to the mic, Mr. Mayor? Are you asking if we're splitting A and B for 2 separate votes? We can't hear you at all, sir. I'm sorry.
I'll see if I can connect in another way.
You just kicked in at the end there.
Thank you. I apologize, colleagues. So is the intention then, yeah, thanks, Michael. Is the intention to, I mean, one option is to receive the report, that's A. But as we vote through the different options, or are we combining all those options for review as one motion?
Well, they're coming through as one motion, Mr. Mayor, but as an A and a B. So people can vote for one option or both options or neither option.
So is A, to be clear, because I apologize for the system I'm working with right now, and so I'm now looking for the indulgence of colleagues. Is A simply to, I mean, the recommendation had been an A and B to receive the report and not to proceed with changes. That was the staff report. And now I see amendments, so I just need to get a sense how those are going to be separated, please.
So if A or B or both of them that's on the table right now fail, then you can put a different motion on the floor, or we could bring it to council with no recommendation from committee.
So I understand that. So where are the options as moved by Councillor Morgan? Where is that coming in?
It's on eScribe. Are you in eScribe? So that's why I read it out. Do you want me to read it again?
Yes. That would be me. Yes, please.
Okay, I will read it again. So the motion on the floor is that the city clerk be directed to proceed to arrange a PPM, including any necessary information at a future meeting of the Corporate Services Committee with respect to the following proposed ward boundary adjustment as outlined in the staff report dated May 31st, 2021. A, option 4, Ward 7, Masonville area to Ward 5, Ward 5, Fanshawe Park Road area to Ward 3, and B, option 7, Ward 4, Hale Street area to Ward 2. So it's really just a motion to have a public participation meeting with these as the proposals that are on the table. It's not right away making these adjustments. It's asking the public to comment on these adjustments.
So the staff recommendations are off the table at this stage, I take it?
Yes, yes, unless this is defeated, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, it's Kathy. I just wanted to let you know that we have staff on our way to the mayor's office to see if we can assist.
Perfect. Thank you, Madam Clerk. So I think I can call the question, and I don't think it's necessary to separate them out, but I'll call them separately anyway. Let's put A on the table, and I'll call the vote on A. That is option 4, Ward 7, Masonville area to Ward 5, Ward 5, Fanshawe Park Road area to Ward 3. And it's a PPM.
Chair, without eScribe, I will respectfully vote no.
Did you say that you wanted to vote no, Mr. Mayor? Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councillor.
I'm also struggling here in the meeting today as my connection is not strong, but I think we're voting on part A of the motion, and I wanted to submit my vote as a no.
Thank you, Councillor.
Closing the vote, the motion is lost on a tie vote, 3-3.
Okay, and now I'll go to to part B of the motion, which is option 7, Ward 4, Hale Street area to Ward 2. And that vote is now being opened.
Madam Chair, I'll submit my vote as no again.
Thank you, Councillor. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor. Can you say it one more time, Mr. Mayor, really loudly?
Sure, I can. Thank you. I will respectfully vote no.
We got you loud and clear that time, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
lost on a tie vote. 3.
So we can put another motion on the floor, or we can send it to council with no decision. Councillor Van Holst?
And Madam Chair, can I just put receipt of the report on the floor?
So the motion on the floor is to receive the staff report. Do I have a second? Councillor Pelosa, thank you. I'm having trouble with my enunciating today. I'll call the vote.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councillor.
I didn't hear what Councillor Van Holst is moving, so I'm unable to vote if I don't hear.
Yeah.
It's really cutting out.
Sorry, Councillor, we're just report.
Okay, and if did anybody move to move the staff recommendation?
No, Councillor. It would go
Is
to
that an
committee
option?
with no recommendation, and so council will make the decision if we don't send a recommendation to council.
So Chair, is this any easier volume-wise? Can you hear me?
That's great. Yes, thank you. I'm just going to confer with the clerk for a second. So if we receive this report, it will go to council as receiving the report, and any councillor at the council meeting can amend whatever that motion. The motion will go on the floor as receipt, and any councillor can make amendments to that motion at that time at council. And so I've opened the vote, and Councillor Kayabaga, how do you vote on receipt?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Councillor.
I think I heard my name.
I'm wondering how you vote. The motion is
to vote.
receive the report.
I'll vote yes.
Thank you, Councillor.
So Chair, I'm barely whispering now as opposed to yelling. I think you hear me, and I'm voting yes to receive. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We heard that. You vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed 6-0.
Thank you. That takes us to items for direction. We have no scheduled items. 4.1 is the Province of Ontario request for comment, code of conduct for members of council, and report on the Town of Collingwood judicial inquiry. Do I have a mover for that one, and any comments, questions, etc.? Deputy Mayor, you're moving it? Do I have a second before I take comments? Seconded by Councillor Pelosa. Thank you. Did you want to comment, Deputy Mayor?
Yes. So my understanding is this is the request for comment for code of conduct for council members. I think the clerks have outlined this. I'm not sure of any other actions beyond what we've already taken are necessary. So I support the motion as it stands.
So the motion is receive, and then part B is the city clerk be advised of any actions to be taken in response to the above noted report. So it's kind of an open-ended motion right now, and it's up to a committee to decide if we want to direct the clerk to take any action. I'll just open this all up to debate. And Deputy Mayor, do you have more comments to make?
No, I'm interested in hearing what my colleagues. want to say on this.
Okay, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to let colleagues know that that in this whole issue of conduct for members of council, and we're talking in terms of Collingwood, I can tell you that Ottawa is dealing with a very significant issue, and all of this has been brought to the attention of the provincial government, so you know, and to the Minister of Municipal Affairs, Solicitor General, in terms of having some impacts. I don't want to presuppose the Collingwood judicial inquiry, but I do want to say that this is going beyond that, where the province is very seriously looking at this. And then I think it will come back to us in a more appropriate way for further action at another time. But I certainly support the recommendation as initiated by my colleagues.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Go to you, Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on page 80 of our written agenda, at the bottom, it talks about training and education with respect to the code of conduct should be mandatory for new members of council. I don't know if it needs to be mandatory, but certainly I think it should be available. So some formal training on that code and how it might have changed would be certainly a valuable thing to do early on in the next term. So I hope we would arrange something like that. Reading through the report is interesting. I think, of course, the clerks have picked out many of the most pertinent things. 306 recommendations. Seems like we're getting a lot into the weeds. And of course, the challenge is that really the code is asking us to be impartial. And then if someone's not impartial, then we need all these rules to try and rein them in. So of course, our hope is certainly just having people that can act impartially. That's the goal. Some of them, I'm concerned about. I think one of the recommendations from the AMO goes too far. I don't know how. It'd be very difficult to start suspending council members if they think that their attendance is affecting the ability of council to make necessary decisions. So in the interest of the public. So trying to determine those things would be nightmarish. And I think our democracy works pretty well. It works pretty well as it is in those instances. And I think things are going well in terms of the pandemic. As they give an example of an emergency. However, there's always unintended consequences of things. So we might say, well, in the case of emergency, we need to do this, and then it's a bylaw that stands for everything, and then it gets very complicated. So we'll have to watch to see what happens there. But of course, we're not necessarily recommending anything right now. At least I don't have any immediate recommendations for the clerks, other than perhaps that training. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll go back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. A question through you to the clerk, if I can. Part A, to receive, is pretty clear. B was less clear, where it says that the clerk be advised of any actions to be taken in response to the above noted reports. So my question through you to the clerk is, are you anticipating that the intention today, notwithstanding the report of the Collingwood inquiry, is the intent to accept their recommendations as ours, or where in your recommendation was your intent as far as what you were looking for us to consider today?
So they're waiting for direction from us, Mr. Mayor, but I'll go to the clerk if she wants to expand on that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, since it is the council code of conduct, I didn't believe it was appropriate for me to bring any specific recommendations forward. I know that the province is looking for comments back on their consultation by July. And I just brought to your attention the comments that AMO had brought forward in case council wanted to consider those if they're going to submit any comments. I realize that we do have, I believe Deputy Mayor Morgan will be attending a session with the province on the code of conduct. Generally, I was just looking to see if there was anything that you wanted us to add to the code of conduct that you were looking for us to do at this point in time.
So Chair, the reason I asked the question is I know that, again, I'll cite Ottawa as the example where it's been fairly public, the conduct of one particular councillor, and that's been a public situation as articulated by their mayor and other council members to the point of not just suspension of remuneration, but going well beyond that. That talks about the potential penalties that you'll see on page 78. And that's still a working process from the province. So I'll presume that the intention of the clerk by sharing all of this beyond the several recommendations is that this can go as far today as we would choose to take it. And so that's helpful. And so let's see what colleagues say. I'd be interested in the Deputy Mayor's thoughts on this too, but I mean, obviously serious issues, and this is all about public trust. So I'll sit on that for just a few moments, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question to the clerk. I'm not seeing anybody else with their hands up right now. We are proceeding with a new terms of reference and a new search sort of for a new integrity commissioner in the not too distant future. I wonder, based on some of the comments from the Collingwood Judicial Inquiry and also I believe Mississauga, is it something maintaining a lobbyist registry or some of the duties that are laid out here? Could that be something that's added to the terms of reference for the next integrity commissioner?
Through Madam Chair, yes, and even the current integrity commissioner could weigh in with respect to recommendations on any changes to the code of conduct. And it has been circulated to our integrity commissioner so that that he's aware that the report was coming forward. Generally, I would say your current code of conduct is in pretty good shape in response to some of the comments that were outlined in the report. But if the thought is to wait to hear what the outcome is from the province and what the outcome and then have either the current integrity commissioner or the future integrity commissioner weigh in with any changes, that may also be appropriate as well.
Okay, I'll go to you, Deputy Mayor Morgan.
Yes, so my intent was to put just the motion on the floor without providing any specific direction to the clerks to proceed with any additional comments, pending the discussion that we have here today and whether there were compelling comments that colleagues had. As you can see from the report, we have associations who are weighing in on this through their processes, being at AMO as the prime example. And of course, you know, residents can obviously write in and let the province know how they feel that their elected officials should be held to account. So I didn't particularly have anything compelling to add myself beyond the work that is already being done. But as I am going to sit in on the session, I was interested very much so in any other comments that colleagues have on what the province is considering, which are outlined in the report. Some of the things are considering, but I didn't want to presume to make some sort of special direction in the motion to say, and we should oppose AMO's third point. But I think that this is the purpose of this discussion. If committee and council feel that way, you know, this would be the appropriate time where a council to make an adjustment to do such a thing. For now, I just wanted to have the motion on the floor, and very open to having folks amend it and add a specific direction to the clerks to take action or render an opinion on some of the things that the province is considering.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. I wonder if Councillor Van Holst, if you could take the chair again.
I shall, Madam Chair, and I go to you now, Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you. And I've had some conversations with staff as well about our code of conduct, and as well beyond that, our procurement policies and things like that. And they have advised me that they think we're in pretty good shape with the policies we have in place right now. And Councillor Van Holst, you spoke about impartiality, and that is extremely important. But there's also an aspect of transparency here. And I know whenever we deal with an extremely contentious, not even always contentious, but a timely matter that's generating a lot of comment, a lot of attention, people don't really understand how we go through our processes to make the decisions that we make at council. And I know that there are a lot of people that think councillors are unduly influenced, or there have been accusations made whenever, especially when a decision is made that somebody doesn't agree with. So I think the transparency part is extremely important. What happens at the Board of Health when we meet every single month at the Board of Health, the medical officer of health voluntarily reports out, he has an activity report that he brings to the board every single month, and he lists everybody he's met with or spoken with and the issue they talked about. And it's for transparency, so people can understand the kinds of conversations that are taking place in the community around certain issues. So I think that kind of transparency is important. And I think I would like to amend the Deputy Mayor's motion to ask the Integrity Commissioner to report back to us or to weigh in on the idea of a lobbyist registry that would also form part of our council code of conduct. And that the Integrity Commissioner would look at the things that are happening in other municipalities, especially in Ottawa, Collingwood, and Mississauga, and make recommendations to council on the possibility of a lobbyist registry. Is that too many words that I've spoken, Madam Clerk, or does? Thank you. So that would be my amendment, or I would like it to be a friendly amendment, but if the Deputy Mayor wants me to make it as a formal amendment, I'm happy to do that as well.
I don't see any harm in getting some information back from the Integrity Commissioner on this. In fact, my understanding is that, and the clerk can correct me, that this is still an outstanding item on our deferred matters list, or maybe it's been dropped, but I'd like to know if that's confirmed or not.
Okay, so let's go to the clerk and find out that, and I will, if necessary, ask for a seconder for Councillor Cassidy's motion. But to the clerk, is the lobbyist registry something that we're working on?
You, Mr. Vice Chair, it is not currently on the deferred list. So if it's to be added, this would be the appropriate way to do that.
Okay, so thank you.
And Mr. Presiding Officer, if I could just interject, Councillor Morgan indicated that he would make that part of his motion. So you might want to check with Councillor Pelosa if she's okay seconding that.
Okay, to Councillor Pelosa.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I'm fine with the amendment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Then are there any other comments about a lobbyist registry? So I see the mayor has a hand up, and also Councillor Kayabaga. Councillor Kayabaga, I think you may have had your hand up first.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. I put my hand up because I wanted to second the motion in case it wasn't a friendly amendment. But I do agree with Councillor Cassidy that this is something that the community has also been looking for a while, and I wasn't even aware that it has been removed off of our deferred matters list, and I'm happy to see this come back. And yeah, so I think that this is something that it's long overdue, and I think that we need to do it.
Thank you, Councillor Kayambaga. Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much. What the government of Ontario was looking for, if I may, and I'll turn your attention to page 81 and 2. Issues. One is in terms of the code of conduct, relates number one to penalties associated with members of council, and then secondly the issue around, and that's for certain conduct, and then the second has to do with the lobbyist registry. And I think we're dealing with the lobbyist registry. In fact, I think that's also reasonably articulated in the recommendations coming out of Collingwood. But what we're not talking about are I think, if I'm not incorrect, Chair, you can correct me, but I think the most that we can do in the event of the most heinous of conduct for anyone as a member of council, beyond looking for apologies and stripping folks from committees, suspending pay for 90 days. I believe that's the maximum penalty that we could apply. Is that not correct? Or is it? You'll tell me.
Well, that's how I read it in the report. Perhaps there's a member of staff that can give us a more definitive answer.
Perhaps the clerk.
Through Madam Chair, yes, the regulations are contained in the Municipal Act. I'm just trying to find the page that quotes the Municipal Act. It's a reprimand, a suspension of pay to the member in respect to their services as a member of council or a local board for a period of up to 90 days. And then if something goes to court with respect to the code of conduct, then a judge has other authorities, which includes reprimand to the member or former member, suspend pay for up to 90 days, declare the member's seat vacant, declare the member's seat vacant, I repeat it twice, disqualify the member or former member from being a member during a period of time, not more than 7 years, etc. That's on page 78. And the Integrity Commissioner can only undertake such actions as they're allowed to under law.
I think that, thank you for that. I think if I can share with colleagues where the Ontario Big City Mayors have come to one mind, is that they would like to have consistent application of the code of conduct as it relates to, again, I'll turn your attention, colleagues, to page 81, where it talks about where AMO has recommended the following: the levying of the administrative monetary policy for a violation of code of conduct with a number of penalty ranges, suspension for that period of time, referral to judiciary. It feels to me, and if the clerk says we're already there, basically what it means is that we have the ability to refer this to independent judiciary, who can then remove the counselor. So can you just clarify, clerk, is that where we are today within our own guidelines?
Through Madam Chair, I'm not sure about whether we're there with respect to the recommendations in the Collingwood judicial matter. But as far as where we are currently, when you're talking about penalties, we have to follow what the Municipal Act sets out as far as what the penalties are. So the integrity commissioner right now, can give a written or verbal, ask the member to give a written or verbal apology. Again, it depends on what the offense is. Return the property or reimbursement its value underspent. This is with respect to the current code of conduct. So again, I go back to the Municipal Act, and we have to, the integrity commissioner has to follow what is set out in that legislation, and I believe part of what the province is looking for is input as to whether that legislation needs to be enhanced to provide for greater penalties than what is currently provided for. And if a matter goes to the court, again, it depends on what the offense is and what a judge could potentially order in those kind of circumstances.
And I think, colleagues, thank you, Clerk, and through your chair. I think what the government of Ontario is looking for is our perspective on adding greater penalties for extremely serious offenses or contraventions of the Code of Conduct. And that's why those things that beyond a 90-day suspension without pay could ultimately mean removal of a councillor, which we do not have that capacity to do at this time. And a councillor, mayor, whatever it might be. So any member of council, I should say. So I think that with that, I think what they're doing is looking for our perspective as a municipality, how far we're prepared to support or not the imposition of additional penalties for serious offenses. And I think that's pretty clear. So I don't know if from that chair, like my view is that feels appropriate to me. I'm not sure how colleagues feel, but and please God, it's never anything that we never have to enforce, but there's been examples where that has been that significant. So I only say that because if colleagues were comfortable with including support of the additional penalties as outlined on page 81, I'd certainly support that if that was the wish of colleagues. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair.
And Madam Chair, or Councillor Cassidy, if do you have any further comments on this issue before I return the chair to you?
No, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Van Holst. Thanks for jumping in for me. That was great. And I'll go to the clerk now.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify that this is in respect to the violations of the Code of Conduct. There are other pieces of legislation, including the Municipal Elections Act, that have other penalties that could potentially make a member of council disqualified from holding office. So I just want to make it clear we're just talking about penalties with respect to a violation under the Code of Conduct at this point in time.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. So Deputy Mayor Morgan, who's moving this motion, it sounds like the mayor is wondering if you support adding to the motion, saying that the London City Council supports adding penalties as outlined in this report in our submission to the provincial government. Is that correct, Mr. Mayor? What are your thoughts on that, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, I'm fine including that as well if the seconder is. I think the mayor's comments were reasonable, and I would also let colleagues know that the language for B is now available in eScribe, and if it's not my turn to debate, so I'll let you go, Chair. The answer is yes.
So Madam Deputy Clerk, there's maybe a C then to add to that? And I have not heard yet from Councillor Pelosa if she supports adding that to the motion as well as the second.
The seconder is fine. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll read A and B so far while the clerk works on C. That on the recommendation of the city clerk, the following actions be taken with respect to the Code of Conduct for members of council. A, the report dated May 31st, 2021, entitled Province of Ontario, Request for Comment, Code of Conduct for Members of Council, and report on the Town of Collingwood judicial inquiry be received. And B, the city clerk be requested to include in the contract with the next City of London Integrity Commissioner requirements for reporting to the Municipal Council with respect to a lobbyist register and recommendations to the council related to current reviews in the province. And there will be a C soon, coming soon. Mr. Mayor, how does C, the City of London supports the recommendations coming from AMO?
Very general, but I think it gets the point.
And mover and seconder, that's good with you too?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Councillor
Yes.
Van Holst, you have your hand up again?
Yes, thank you. So I think we definitely need to create a situation where crime does not pay, because I think that's a real slap in the face of our electorate when a representative can do something, and even if they're dismissed, they can still retain a benefit for what's happened. That's certainly something we want to avoid. I'm afraid I can't really support all the recommendations of AMO. I think, you know, I'm concerned about having our council get into the really ambiguous wording that's found in the idea of suspending other council for making it hard to make decisions in the interest of the public. That seems like the kind of thing that a decision could be made, and then the entire council gets sued by one member because of a decision that. So I really question that, and I also question it in the light of just censorship. So that it seems like a very undemocratic way to deal with things. Although I haven't seen examples where this really needs to be implemented. So I don't know if we can become more specific with that, or I'll just be happy to vote against it. But the suggestions that the mayor brought up regarding some of these, I do agree with. Just I think that one's, as I said, going a bit too far. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So I'll go to the mayor, and if you're still not in favor of everything that's included in C, then I will call C separately, but I'll go to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much. Just to give the council some comfort, it is not up to council to terminate a councillor whose conduct is deemed to be of such a degree that it deserves the councillor no longer serving in that capacity. That's why the third point of that is referring this to a member of the judiciary. So an independent member of the judiciary. So not us, who would then have, but it would then be the responsibility of the judiciary to make findings known. So I think AMO has been clear. Certainly big city mayors in Ontario have been clear. And I hope that helps a little bit. So it isn't council's prerogative to terminate a councillor's role. But certainly because right now we have the ability to suspend without pay. Well, actually, that's the recommendation through the Integrity Commissioner. But I would tell you that this goes farther, but it's independent ultimately of council to that if there was ever a determination that a council member's position is to be vacated.
Okay, I'll go back to you, Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the mayor. I am reassured by your statements and for having reported on the discussions with the big city mayors. Okay, that seems reasonable. Certainly, the referral to the judiciary is appropriate, and that's, I think, the appropriate place for that decision to be made.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that clarification. I also do want to point out that with this motion, there's also what's already been mentioned today, that Deputy Mayor Morgan will be representing our city council at the table where these things are discussed directly with the province. So that is very good as well. Michael, sorry, Councillor Van Holst, your hand is still up, so I don't.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. Just wanted to make sure. And I'll look to see if there are any other comments or questions on this item. And I'm seeing none. So we have a motion on the floor, A, B, and C. It's been moved and seconded. Everybody seems comfortable with it. So I will call the question.
I'll vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I'll vote yes, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Kayabaga.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed.
Thank you, everybody. That takes us to, it's an application for an issuance of proclamation from the Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. I'm looking for a mover, a seconder, and any comments or questions. Moved by Councillor Van Holst and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. I just want to say from the chair that I'm happy personally to see this come forward. I'm sure every single person on this council has in some way been touched by cancer. Only some of us have been unfortunately touched by childhood cancer. So, and we are a regional center here serving populations far and wide outside of London, Ontario coming. And I myself have been served at the Regional Cancer Center here in London. I want to say they do a phenomenal job. And there's unfortunately a lot of children that come through that center as well. And they're also served at the local Ronald McDonald House. So just wanted to make those comments. Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you very much. And of course, that's true. I was disappointed in the application itself for not having mentioned those things. There was very little that's really brought up here to show how engaged our community is in there. So once again, I think that we need a little more from our applicants in tying this. I think this application would have been great if some of those agencies had been involved, mentioned in them, or even asked to request this from the organization that's coming out of Toronto. Thank
you, Councillor. I'll go to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks very much. I think the challenge is that when you look at the application, and I'm just commenting on Councilor Knowles' comments, it says provide details of your organization's connection to London. What it doesn't say is it doesn't come from London, but of course, Chair, you're quite correct about how this impacts, sadly, too many Londoners. It might be the wording of that point, as opposed to just the connection to London, that it be something stronger, that it comes from an organization in London. I think that's a discussion for another day, but I'm certainly prepared, knowing the impacts it has. I'm sure we all will support this as well. Thanks.
Thank you for those comments, Mr. Mayor. And we are still in the sort of the pilot phase of this. So I agree that if we could change the application form in some way to really push that London connection. I did reach out to some local Child Can people, and they were aware of this application. So they did know, even though the local people didn't instigate it, they were aware that it was coming from the national chapter. So I agree that we can do better, and that's what this pilot phase is for, so we can learn those things. Are there any other comments or questions on this application for proclamation? I'm seeing none, so I'll call the question.
I vote yes, Madam Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 6-0.
Thank thank you. And I'm not sure if everybody heard that, but the mayor had to excuse himself. He is in a meeting with the big city mayors from across the country. So there is one final added piece of business, and it is another application. This is for an issuance of proclamation for the longest day of smiles. And it is coming from an organization called Operation Smile Canada. This is an organization that provides services operations as necessary for children that were born with cleft palate. I'll look for a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Van Holst, seconded by, and I'll second that since I'm not seeing anyone jumping on. Any comments or questions on this one? So I did look into this organization. They serve communities across the country. As I said, it is a charitable organization. They provide life-changing surgery to children that are born with cleft conditions. So it's on the floor, moved and seconded, and I'll call the question. I didn't hear your actual vote, Councillor. If you could repeat that. Are you having technical difficulties, Councillor Kayabaga, because you're not coming through here? You could actually raise your hand if you vote. Yes. There you go. You vote. Councillor Kayabaga votes yes.
Closing the vote, the motion is passed 5-0.
That takes us to the end of our public agenda. We have 3 items on the confidential agenda. They are outlined on the public agenda, and I'll look for a motion to go in camera. Moved by Councillor Van Holst and seconded by the Deputy Mayor, maybe? Seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Okay, I'll call that question.
I vote yes.
Thank you, Councillor.
Closing the vote, the motion's passed 5-0. To point out that an added reason that's on the public added agenda related to a land disposition matter.